Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. The suspicions had started small. Emily had always been attentive, warm, and affectionate. She was the kind of woman who'd text me during the day just to check in, the kind who remembered every little detail of our life together. But over the last few weeks, something had shifted. At first, I thought it was just stress from her job. After all, the marketing firm she worked at had just launched a major campaign, and she'd been putting in long hours. I told myself that was the reason for her distraction. But the late nights grew more frequent, and her phone became an extension of her hand, always clutched tightly, always facing down. She wasn't cold exactly, just distant. More guarded. When she smiled, it didn't reach her eyes the way it used to, and when she kissed me, there was something missing, some spark, some warmth that had once been there. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It clung to me, tightening like a knot in my chest that wouldn't loosen no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. Was it paranoia? Was I reading too much into nothing? I told myself that I was being ridiculous. But deep down, I couldn't let it go. One night, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, the silence between us felt louder than usual. Emily was scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging the meal I'd cooked, her fork lazily picking at the food. I cleared my throat, trying to break the tension. "Everything okay at work?" I asked, forcing a casual tone into my voice. Emily looked up, startled, as if she'd forgotten I was even there. "Oh, yeah. Just busy, you know." She smiled, but it was a shadow of her usual brightness. "Sorry, I'm just exhausted." I nodded, but inside, the knot tightened further. I wanted to ask her more, about the late nights, about why she always seemed so preoccupied, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Not yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, while Emily slept soundly beside me. I wanted to trust her. I needed to trust her. But every time I closed my eyes, the doubts came rushing back. What if there was someone else? What if she was hiding something from me? By the time the sun came up, I'd made up my mind. I needed to talk to someone about this, someone who could give me some perspective. I grabbed my phone and texted Mike, my older brother. He had always been the calm, rational one, the guy who never let his emotions get the best of him. And he'd been through something similar before. His ex-wife Rachel had cheated on him, and their divorce had been ugly. "Hey, need to talk. Are you free?" I typed, then hit send. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a reply. "Yeah, I'm home. Come over." Later that morning, I found myself sitting in Mike's kitchen, a half-empty cup of coffee in my hands. Mike leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me with his usual calm expression. "So," he said, breaking the silence. "What's going on?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I think something's going on with Emily." Mike raised an eyebrow. "What kind of something?" "I don't know, man," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "She's been distant, working late all the time, and she's acting weird with her phone. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I can't shake this feeling that she's hiding something." Mike nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. "You think she's cheating?" The word hit me hard, even though I'd been thinking it for days. Saying it out loud made it feel real in a way I wasn't ready for. I shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "I don't know. Maybe. I just don't know what to do." Mike let out a slow breath and crossed the kitchen to sit down across from me. "I get it," he said quietly. "I went through the same thing with Rachel. It's hard not to assume the worst when you see the signs." "I remember," I said, my voice low. "But what if I'm wrong? What if it's all in my head?" "Look," Mike said, leaning forward, "when Rachel started pulling away, I ignored it at first. I didn't want to see it, didn't want to believe that she could be cheating on me. But when the signs were there, late nights, secrecy, all that, I couldn't unsee it. I ended up confronting her without proof, and when she denied it, I felt like an idiot. I didn't get the truth until later. I clenched my fists, the memories of Mike's messy divorce flashing through my mind. I had seen what the truth had done to him, how it had broken him. He hadn't been the same since, and I wasn't sure I could handle that kind of devastation. "So what are you saying?" I asked, my voice tight. "I shouldn't say anything. I'm saying don't jump the gun unless you know for sure," Mike said firmly. I confronted Rachel because I knew. If you don't have proof, if you're just acting on suspicion, it could blow up in your face. Look for the facts first. Otherwise, you might push her away for no reason. I slumped in my chair, my mind racing. What Mike said made sense. But it didn't make it any easier to sit with the uncertainty. Mike watched me carefully, then added, "But if you do find something, you need to be prepared for what comes next. Trust me on that." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was ready for any of it. The confrontation, the truth, whatever it was, it felt like a storm was coming, and I was standing at the edge of it, unsure if I should brace for impact or run. As I left Mike's house, his words echoed in my head. I didn't want to believe that Emily could betray me like Rachel had betrayed him. But the doubts were there, and they were only growing stronger. For now, I would hold off. I'd look for the facts, just like Mike said. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling that my life was about to change, and not for the better. The decision to install hidden cameras in our home felt like a breach of trust, a violation of the very sanctity of our relationship. But I couldn't shake the gnawing need for certainty. If Emily was hiding something, I needed evidence, something concrete that would either confirm my fears or put them to rest. The idea of snooping through her personal space was both repulsive and necessary. When Emily left for her business trip, I wasted no time. I spent the entire morning setting up the surveillance equipment. I installed cameras in the living room and bedroom, careful to position them in places where they wouldn't be noticed but would capture the most activity. I also set up a voice recorder in our bedroom, hidden behind a stack of books on the nightstand. The thought of listening to her private conversations felt like an invasion, but it was a risk I had to take. The first night after Emily left, I sat in front of the computer, reviewing the footage from the cameras and the recordings. The house was eerily quiet, and every creak of the floorboards seemed louder than usual. The footage showed nothing unusual, just me pacing around the house, occasionally stopping to check the cameras, and the house itself sitting in stillness. The next day, I focused on the voice recordings. Listening to them felt like an exercise in torture. Each crackle and hiss of the tape seemed to amplify my anxiety. I heard mundane sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant rumble of traffic, but nothing that suggested Emily was up to anything suspicious. It was infuriatingly inconclusive. On the third day, while dusting the living room, I stumbled upon a small, out-of-place box behind the couch. It was a plain, unremarkable thing, and at first, I almost ignored it. But something stopped me. My heart pounded as I opened it, and inside, I found a bracelet, a delicate piece of jewelry with an intricate design that I'd never seen before. There were also a few receipts from a restaurant that Emily and I had never been to. The receipts were dated a few weeks back, which meant she could have been there during the time she'd been working late. The bracelet was particularly disturbing. I tried to remember if I'd ever seen her wear it, but I couldn't recall. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Was this a clue or just a misunderstanding? Later that evening, I called Mike. I needed someone to talk me through this, to help me make sense of what I'd found. "Hey, it's me," I said when Mike answered. "I've been going through the footage and recordings, but it's been pretty uneventful. That is, until today. What did you find?" Mike asked, his voice steady but with an edge of concern. "I found this box behind the couch with a bracelet and some receipts. The bracelet isn't hers, and the receipts are from a place she never mentioned going to," I explained. My voice trembled slightly. "It feels like a smoking gun, but I'm still not sure." Mike was silent for a moment. Have you asked her about it? I sighed heavily. No, not yet. I haven't confronted her because I don't want to make accusations without solid proof. I need to be sure before I say anything. That's a good approach, Mike said. But what are you planning to do with the evidence you have? If it's making you this anxious, it might be time to have a conversation. I don't know if I'm ready, I admitted. I'm scared of what I'll find if I dig too deep. Look, Mike said gently, it's not just about finding out if she's cheating. It's about understanding your relationship and what you want from it. If you found something that doesn't add up, you need to address it. Keeping it bottled up will only eat away at you. His words made sense, but they did little to ease the turmoil inside me. I needed more than just suspicions and half-truths. I needed clarity, something that would either confirm my worst fears or absolve me of them. Over the next few days, I continued monitoring the footage and listening to the recordings. Every new piece of information, no matter how trivial, felt like a puzzle piece I had to fit into place. I found nothing new that contradicted the evidence I had already discovered, but the more I delved into it, the more obsessed I became. My conversations with Emily felt increasingly strained, as though I was looking at her through a lens of suspicion that I couldn't remove. One evening, Emily came home early. We hadn't planned for this, and it threw me off balance. I was in the middle of reviewing the day's footage when she walked in. She looked surprised to see me still home. "Oh, you're here," she said, her voice warm, though it carried a hint of confusion. "I thought you'd be at work later." "Just finishing up some things," I said, trying to sound casual as I closed the laptop quickly. "How was your day?" "Busy, but good," she replied. She leaned in and kissed me, her arms wrapping around me in a gesture that felt sincere. "I missed you." I hugged her back, but my mind was racing. Was this a genuine display of affection, or was she trying to cover her tracks? I couldn't tell anymore. As we settled into the evening, I watched her with a critical eye, trying to reconcile her behavior with the evidence I had. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking just out of sight, hidden behind a veneer of normalcy. The more I saw, the more I began to question everything, her words, her actions, and even my own sanity. The investigation was taking a toll on me, mentally and emotionally. I knew I had to confront her eventually, but the thought of tearing apart our lives over a few suspicious clues was overwhelming. I just hoped that when the time came, I'd be able to face the truth with the clarity and courage I so desperately needed. I thought that the worst part of this ordeal was the waiting, the endless nights of review and the gnawing uncertainties. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment when the full extent of Emily's betrayal became clear. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when I finally mustered the courage to listen to the final recordings. Emily had returned home early again, and the house was unusually quiet. I sat in the dim light of the living room, surrounded by the hushed hum of the rain against the windows. With a heavy heart, I pressed play on the voice recorder, bracing myself for whatever might come. The first few minutes were ordinary. I heard the faint sounds of the house settling, the distant murmur of traffic. But then I caught a familiar voice, Greg's, our neighbor. I had heard him before, but never in the context I was hearing now. My breath hitched as I listened to their conversation unfold. "Emily, we need to be more careful," Greg's voice said, low and intimate. "I don't want anyone to get suspicious." Emily's response was equally soft, her tone filled with a warmth that was meant for me but was now clearly for him. "I know, Greg. I just miss you so much. These last few weeks have been the hardest. I hate sneaking around like this." My heart pounded in my chest. The realization hit me like a freight train. Emily and Greg had been seeing each other behind my back. They had been meeting in secret, their affection for each other so apparent it felt like a slap to my face. I struggled to keep my composure as the recordings continued, recounting their plans and their desire to be together. When the recording ended, I felt a crushing sense of defeat. I had been right all along, but the confirmation did little to soothe the storm of emotions within me. I stared at the floor, trying to steady my breathing, when my phone rang. It was Mike. "Hey," he said, his voice calm but concerned. You okay? You sound off. I'm not okay, I said, my voice cracking. I've listened to the recordings. It's Greg. Emily's been having an affair with him. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Shit, man. I'm so sorry. What are you going to do? I don't know, I said, my voice breaking. I have all this evidence now, but I don't even know how to confront her. I feel like everything I thought I knew is falling apart. Take a deep breath, Mike said gently. You need to decide what you want to do with this information. Confronting her will be hard, but avoiding it won't solve anything. What's important is how you handle this from here. The conversation left me more conflicted than ever. I needed to confront Emily, but the thought of doing so was paralyzing. How would I even begin such a conversation? The weight of the betrayal was almost too much to bear. When Emily came downstairs that evening, she seemed oblivious to the storm I was about to unleash. She walked into the living room, her face lighting up as she saw me. Hey, she said brightly, I thought I'd surprise you with dinner. How does a nice meal sound? I looked at her, my heart aching with every word that I had to say. Emily, we need to talk. Her smile faltered, a look of concern crossing her face. What's wrong? I took a deep breath and gestured to the couch. Please, sit down. As she settled next to me, I pulled out my phone and played a snippet of the recording. Her face went pale as Greg's voice filled the room. The blood drained from her face as she realized what was happening. Emily, is there anything you want to explain? I asked, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at me, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was trying to keep it from you. I thought I could manage it, but I guess I was wrong. I felt a surge of anger and pain. Manage it? You thought you could just hide it from me? I'm so sorry, she said, her voice breaking into sobs. Greg and things just got out of hand. It was supposed to be a fling, but it turned into something more. I never wanted to hurt you. Please, believe me. I was silent, my mind racing as I tried to process her apology. The betrayal was too deep, the hurt too fresh. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, I said quietly. I don't know if this can be fixed. Emily reached out to me, but I recoiled. Please, don't, I said. I need some space. I need to figure out what I want to do. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I'll give you space. Just, please, let me try to make this right. As she left the room, I felt a profound emptiness. The future of our relationship was uncertain, and the road ahead seemed daunting. The next few days were a blur of emotions, phone calls, and conversations with Mike. I wrestled with the decision of what to do next. Eventually, I made the choice to confront Emily with the truth. We had a long, painful conversation about our relationship, about trust and betrayal. The decision to divorce was not made lightly, but it felt like the only way to move forward. In the weeks that followed, I tried to piece my life back together. The divorce process was grueling, and the emotional fallout was heavy. Despite everything, Emily continued to show signs of devotion, reaching out to me with regret and pleas for reconciliation. But as I looked back, I realized that the hardest part wasn't just the betrayal or the divorce. It was coming to terms with the fact that the trust one had in her, and in the future we'd planned together, had been irrevocably shattered. The evidence I'd gathered had led to the painful truth, and though it had been necessary, the process left scars that would take a long time to heal. In the aftermath of the revelations, life took on a surreal quality. Each day felt like navigating through a fog of confusion and hurt. The confrontation with Emily had been a necessary step, but it had left me with a tangled web of emotions and decisions. The divorce process was underway, but the fallout from discovering Emily's affair continued to haunt me. Despite everything, I was left with a complex decision, whether to keep the full extent of my knowledge private or to lay it all bare. The temptation to share the truth was strong, especially with friends and family who might question what had led to the end of our marriage. But there was a part of me that wanted to shield Emily from further public scrutiny, to protect her from the same pain I was feeling. The decision to keep the secret was not just about sparing Emily, it was also about managing my own emotions. I needed time to process everything and find a way to move forward without the added weight of public judgment or pity. One evening, as I was sorting through some papers at home, I received a call from Mike. He had been my sounding board throughout this ordeal, and I knew he would understand the complexities of my feelings. "Hey, Mike," I said, answering the phone. "What's up?" "Not much. Just checking in," Mike said. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," I replied. "The divorce is in motion, and I'm trying to keep things as calm as possible. But there's something I need to talk to you about." "Sure, what's on your mind?" Mike asked. "I've been thinking about whether to tell people the full story," I said, my voice filled with uncertainty. "I mean, should I explain everything that happened, or should I keep it to myself? I don't want to be the guy who airs his dirty laundry in public, but at the same time, I don't want people thinking the worst of me without knowing the truth." "I get it," Mike said sympathetically. "It's a tough call. You have every right to tell your side of the story, but you also have to consider the impact it might have on you and Emily. Sometimes keeping things private can help you heal faster, without the added stress of public judgment." "I've already had to deal with so much," I said, running a hand through my hair. "The betrayal itself is one thing, but the idea of everyone knowing the intimate details makes it feel even more overwhelming." "I'm not sure I'm ready for that." "I hear you," Mike said. "It's your decision, and you have to do what feels right for you. But remember, keeping it private doesn't mean you're hiding from the truth. It just means you're choosing how to handle your own healing process." As we talked, I realized that Mike was right. Keeping the secret wasn't about avoiding the truth, it was about controlling how and when I confronted it. The more I thought about it, the more I understood that sharing the details with others might only prolong my pain and complicate the healing process. Later that week, I met with Emily to discuss the logistics of the divorce. The conversation was emotionally charged but civil. She was still reaching out with apologies and explanations, trying to make amends in any way she could. "Are you sure about this?" Emily asked, her voice trembling as she sat across from me. "I mean, about the divorce and everything?" "Yes, I'm sure," I said firmly. "We've been through too much, and I don't think we can go back to what we had. It's better for both of us to move on." Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand. I wish things could be different. I really do." As we finalized the details, she continued to express her regret, but I could see the depth of her remorse and the difficulty she was facing. It was a strange mixture of sadness and relief, sadness for what we were losing and relief for the clarity of the decision. In the weeks that followed, I kept to myself, focusing on the process of rebuilding my life. I attended therapy sessions, talked to close friends who were aware of the situation, but avoided discussing the affair in detail. My friends and family saw the divorce as a personal matter, and while they offered support, they didn't press for details I wasn't willing to share. One day, as I was out for a walk with a friend, he asked, "So, how's everything going with the divorce?" "I know it must be tough. It's a work in progress," I said. "I'm just trying to take things one step at a time. It's better this way." "Yeah, I get that," he said sympathetically. "Just remember, if you ever need to talk, I'm here." His support was comforting, but I appreciated the fact that he didn't pry into the specifics. It allowed me to keep my dignity and privacy intact while navigating the painful process. As time passed, I began to find some semblance of normalcy. The emotional wounds were still healing, but keeping the details of the affair private allowed me to focus on moving forward without the constant pressure of external judgments. I continued to work on myself, rebuilding my sense of self and learning to trust again. In the end, the choice to keep the secret was both a protection and a burden. It shielded Emily from further public humiliation and spared me from additional scrutiny. But it also meant carrying the weight of the truth alone, a heavy but necessary part of my journey toward healing and acceptance.